Fresh figs at a grocery store sell for $4 to $8 per pound. Dried figs cost even more. The global fresh fig market alone is valued at roughly $1.4 billion. The dried fig market adds another $1.4 billion on top of that. Turkey, a single country, exports more than $290 million worth of dried figs each year and controls over half the world's dried fig trade. The United States fresh fig market is projected to surpass $600 million by the early 2000s and 30s. Every year, billions of dollars change hands over a fruit that most people have never thought about growing themselves. And yet a single fig cutting costs nothing. A small starter tree costs $3 to $10. One mature fig tree, properly cared for, produces 40 to 200 pounds of fruit per season, depending on the variety, the soil, and the climate. At grocery store prices, that is $160 to $1,600 of fruit from a single tree every single year. The tree does not die after one season. It does not need replanting. It does not require a greenhouse or a team of workers or a sophisticated irrigation system. A fig tree can live for 100 years. Some have lived for over 200. The oldest recorded common fig tree, specimen in Bulgaria, reached 282 years of age. Your great-great-grandchildren could eat from a tree you plant this spring. The investment is $10 once. The return is a lifetime. And this is not some recently engineered superfood developed in a laboratory. This tree was domesticated 11,400 years ago. Before wheat, before barley, before rice, before the invention of pottery, before the first city was built. You can grow it in a 20-gallon container on a balcony. Why are we spending billions importing a fruit that grows in almost every climate on Earth? Let that number settle for a moment. 11,400 years. In 2006, a team of archaeobotanists, led by Mordecai Kislev of Bar Ilan University, published a paper in the journal Science that changed our understanding of how agriculture began. The team had been excavating a site called Gilgal I, a small Neolithic village located about 13 kilometers north of ancient Jericho in the lower Jordan Valley. Inside the charred remains of a collapsed house, they found 9 whole carbonized figs and more than 300 fig fragments. Radiocarbon dating placed them at approximately 11,400 years old. That alone would have been remarkable, but there was something else. These figs were parthenocarpic. That word matters. Parthenocarpic means the fruit developed without pollination, without seeds, without the involvement of a fig wasp. In nature, parthenocarpic fig trees appear occasionally through rare genetic mutation, but because they produce no seeds, they cannot reproduce on their own. The only way a parthenocarpic fig tree can continue to exist is if a human being takes a branch, pushes it into the earth, and deliberately propagates it. That is not gathering. That is farming. And it happened a full 1,000 years before any evidence of wheat or barley cultivation appears in the archaeological record. Harvard's own reporting on the discovery described it plainly. Figs were likely the first domesticated crop on Earth. Not wheat, not rice, not corn, a fig. Think about what that means. Before the first brick, before the first irrigation canal, before the first written word, human beings looked at a tree and decided it was worth keeping alive. They selected mutations that produced sweeter, seedless fruit. They cut branches and rooted them in new soil. They carried those cuttings as they moved across landscapes, and the tree responded. It grew wherever they planted it. It survived drought. It survived poor soil. It survived neglect. The fig tree, Ficus carica, is one of the most adaptable fruit trees on the planet, and it became the silent partner in the birth of human civilization. The relationship only deepened as centuries turned into millennia. In ancient Mesopotamia, fig trees grew in the gardens of Sumerian temple complexes. Cuneiform tablets from the 3rd millennium BCE mention figs alongside dates and grapes as staple crops. The Egyptians revered the fig tree as a sacred plant. The sycamore fig, Ficus sycamoris, appeared in tomb paintings and funerary offerings, and in mythology as the tree that stood at the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The goddess Hathor was sometimes depicted emerging from a sycamore fig to offer food and water to the deceased. Dried figs were placed in tombs, including those of pharaohs, to nourish the soul in the afterlife. In ancient Greece, figs were considered so essential that the city of Athens passed laws restricting their export. The Greek word for fig informer, sycophantes, literally meant one who reveals figs, referring to someone who reported illegal fig exporters, and that word evolved into our modern English word sycophant. Figs were a staple food of Greek athletes training for the original Olympic Games. They were cheap, calorie-dense, and portable, the energy bar of the ancient world. The philosopher Plato was reportedly fond of figs. Pliny the Elder, writing in his Natural History in the 1st century CE, declared that figs increase the strength of the young and improve the health of the elderly, and that they reduce wrinkles and give the skin a healthier appearance. Roman gladiators ate figs as a primary source of quick energy. Roman legions carried dried figs on long campaigns because they were lightweight, lasted months without spoiling, and provided a concentrated source of sugars, fiber, and minerals. The Bible mentions the fig tree more than 50 times. It is the first plant named by species in the book of Genesis. When Adam and Eve realized they were naked, it was fig leaves they reached for. In the Old Testament, the fig tree symbolized peace, prosperity, and the good life. The phrase to sit under one's own vine and fig tree appears repeatedly, and it became such a powerful image of personal liberty that George Washington used it in letters to describe the promise of the new American Republic. The Prophet Muhammad reportedly called the fig a fruit of paradise, and said if he could choose any fruit to bring to earth from heaven, it would be the fig. In Hinduism, the sacred fig, Ficus religiosa, known as the Bodhi tree, is the tree under which Siddhartha Gautama is said to have attained enlightenment and become the Buddha. The fig genus, Ficus, contains roughly 750 species, and across religions, civilizations, and continents, it has held a place of spiritual and nutritional importance that no other fruit tree can match. And the biology of the fig tree explains why. The relationship between figs and fig wasps is one of the oldest and most intricate examples of mutualism in the natural world, dating back approximately 80 million years. Each of the roughly 750 species of ficus has evolved with its own specific pollinator wasp. The wasp enters the fig through a tiny opening called the ostiole, pollinates the internal flowers, lays eggs, and dies inside. The fig provides a nursery. The wasp provides pollination. Neither organism survives without the other. This co-evolutionary partnership has been running continuously for longer than the Rocky Mountains have existed. But here's the extraordinary thing about the common fig, Ficus carica, the species you would plant at home. The most popular cultivated varieties are self-fertile. They do not need a wasp. They do not need another tree. They do not need cross-pollination. You plant a cutting, it roots, it grows, it fruits, alone. In a pot, on a balcony, in a backyard. That is why the Neolithic farmers at Gilgal were able to propagate parthenocarpic figs without understanding the science behind pollination. The tree was, and still is, astonishingly easy to grow. Let me be specific about what the fruit itself contains, because this is not only history, it is nutrition. 100 grams of dried figs provides approximately 249 calories, 9.8 grams of dietary fiber, 162 milligrams of calcium, 2 milligrams of iron, 68 milligrams of magnesium, and 680 milligrams of potassium. To put that in perspective, dried figs contain more calcium per 100 grams than a glass of milk. They contain more potassium per serving than a banana. They are one of the richest plant sources of calcium available. They provide significant amounts of manganese, vitamin K, and B vitamins. Fresh figs are lower in caloric density, but still provide meaningful amounts of fiber, potassium, and antioxidants. Research published in peer-reviewed journals has identified fig extracts as having anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-diabetic, and anti-tumor properties. A study published in the Wiley journal Food Science and Human Wellness noted that fig compounds demonstrate anti-tumor, anti-inflammatory, and anti-osteoporosis activity linked to high mineral content. Healthline, citing multiple studies, reports that fig leaf extracts have shown anti-tumor activity against human colon, breast, cervical, and lung cancer cell lines. A separate body of research has shown that fig leaf tea can improve insulin sensitivity and reduce postprandial blood glucose levels in diabetic patients. The fruit, the leaf, and the latex of the fig tree all contain bioactive compounds that modern science is still cataloging. Now, let us talk about what it actually takes to grow one. This is not a tropical plant that demands a conservatory. Ficus carica is native to the Mediterranean basin and Western Asia, but it has been successfully grown across an extraordinary range of climates. It is hardy in USDA zones 7 through 11. In Zone 7, where winter temperatures regularly drop below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, fig trees survive with minimal protection, sometimes wrapped in burlap, sometimes simply cut back and allowed to regenerate from the roots in spring. In Zones 8 and above, most varieties are fully perennial and require no winter protection at all. In colder zones, 5 and 6, fig trees thrive in containers. A 20-gallon pot, a sunny balcony, and the willingness to move the pot indoors or into an unheated garage during the coldest months is all that is needed. The tree goes dormant in winter, drops its leaves, and requires almost nothing for months. In spring, you move it back outside and it leaves out and fruits the same year. Varieties like Chicago Hardy, Celeste, Brown Turkey, Violette de Bordeaux, and the compact Fig Nominal and Little Miss Figgy are specifically recommended for container growing. Fig Nominal, for instance, reaches only 20 to 28 inches in height and produces full-size fruit. Little Miss Figgy grows to 4 to 6 feet and is ideal for a patio. These are not ornamental curiosities. They are productive fruit trees that yield dozens to hundreds of figs per season in a pot. Propagation is almost absurdly simple. You take a cutting from a dormant fig tree in late autumn or winter. The cutting should be 6 to 10 inches long, about the thickness of a pencil. You dip the cut end in rooting hormone, though even this step is optional. You stick the cutting into moist potting mix or even a glass of water. Within 2 to 6 weeks, roots appear. Within 6 to 8 months, you have a small tree. Within a year or two, that tree can begin producing fruit. Experienced growers report roughly a 75% success rate with cuttings, and many report higher. You do not need to buy a tree. If you know someone who has one, you can ask for a single branch during winter pruning, and you have the beginning of a tree that may outlive your grandchildren. The fig community online is vibrant and generous. Forums like rfigs.com, the Reddit fig community, and Facebook fig groups have tens of thousands of members who trade cuttings, share variety recommendations, and help beginners troubleshoot their first season. A single cutting, traded for free or purchased for $1 to $3, contains the full genetic potential of a tree that could produce fruit for a century. And the production numbers from a mature tree are not trivial. A healthy, established, in-ground fig tree typically yields 40 to 100 pounds of fruit per year, with some large specimens producing up to 200 pounds in a good season. Even a container fig, restricted to a 15 or 20-gallon pot, can produce 150 to 200 figs in a season once it is a few years old. At an average weight of 30 to 50 grams per fig, that is 10 to 20 pounds per year from a potted tree on a balcony. At grocery store prices of $4 to $8 per pound, a single potted fig tree can produce $40 to $160 worth of fruit per year. An in-ground tree can produce several $100s worth. And the tree asks for almost nothing in return: full sun, occasional watering during fruit development, a handful of balanced fertilizer once or twice per year. That is it. No pesticide regime, no netting. No complicated pruning system. Fig trees have remarkably few pest problems compared to other fruit trees. They do not suffer from the apple scab, fire blight, codling moth, or brown rot that plague stone and pome fruit orchards. Deer tend to avoid them. Most insect pests that bother figs are minor and manageable without chemicals. Yet, despite all of this, despite 11,400 years of cultivation, despite being arguably the first crop that human beings ever grew, despite being one of the most nutritious fruits available, despite being one of the easiest fruit trees to propagate and maintain, and despite producing food reliably for decades or centuries from a single planting, the fig tree is functionally absent from most modern Western yards, gardens, balconies, and public spaces. The global industry continues to grow. Turkey produces over 300,000 tons per year. Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Iran, and Spain follow. The United States imports increasing volumes at increasing prices. Consumers pay premium prices for a product they could grow for the cost of a small pot of soil and a single branch. The reason is not horticultural. The reason is cultural. Somewhere during the 20th century, the Western relationship with food shifted from production to consumption. Lawns replaced kitchen gardens. Supermarkets replaced backyard orchards. The knowledge that a fig tree could grow in Chicago, in New York, in London, in almost any temperate city on earth did not disappear because it was wrong. It disappeared because nobody was selling it. There's no corporate profit in a tree that propagates for free, produces for 100 years, and needs almost no inputs. The annual global market for ornamental lawn and garden products exceeds $100 billion. The market for a fig cutting traded between neighbors is $0. The economics of attention are not aligned with the economics of self-sufficiency. But the tree does not care about economics. It does not care about trends. It does not care whether you live in an apartment in Istanbul or a suburb of Philadelphia. If you give it sunlight and drainage, it will grow. If you give it a decade, it will feed your family. If you give it a century, it will feed your neighborhood. 11,400 years ago, someone in the Jordan Valley pressed a branch into the earth and changed the trajectory of human civilization. The branch took root. It is still taking root, in every climate, in every continent, except Antarctica, for anyone willing to plant it. If this changed the way you think about the oldest tree in agriculture, subscribe. If you have a fig tree, tell me your variety and your zone in the comments. If you do not have one yet, start this spring. A single cutting, a single pot, a partnership, 11,400 years in the making. The next video will explore another ancient plant that modern industry taught you to ignore. I will see you there.